what is a complex number? Well, a complex number comes from our complex number system, right? And so in our complex number system, we have real and we have imaginary numbers. Under the real number system, we have rational and irrational numbers, and then under rational, we have whole numbers, we have integers, we have natural numbers. Well, in this video, we're going to talk about what is a complex number. And so complex means, oh, we must be including a real and an imaginary number, and that's exactly what's the case. So we look at our definition of complex number. It says when it's in standard form, it's a number a plus bi, where a and b are real numbers. The number a is the real part, and the number bi is the imaginary part, right? So it's going to look something like this, a plus bi. So that's going to be maybe like 4 plus 3i, okay? So a is the real part of our complex number because that would be just some real number, 3, 5, -8, 2/3, whatever. And then bi is the imaginary part because the I is our imaginary unit, which is the square root of -1. And so now we can think about the concept of imaginary numbers. And we have in green here an imaginary number is when we have a plus bi and b is just not 0, right? So if b were 0, then maybe we would have something like 3 plus 0i. Well, 0i, that would be 0, right? And so this would just be equal to 3. And so in that case, we would have a real number, not an imaginary number. So in order for us to have an imaginary number, b cannot be 0. Now, if we have what we call a pure imaginary number, is when a is equal to 0 and b is not equal to 0, right? Because think about what that would do. Well, if a was 0, so if, say we had 0 plus 3i, well, now the real part of our complex number is 0, so it goes away, right? So this is just equal to 3i. So essentially it becomes what we call a pure imaginary number because there is no real part attached to it, right? It's still part of the complex number system, but we would call it a pure imaginary number because it's just the number and then I with it. So if we think about this diagram down here, and this is where we'll end this video, for complex numbers we have real numbers and we have imaginary numbers, right? So our real numbers we would write when b is equal to 0, right? Because that imaginary part is going to go away, and we would just be left with numbers such as -1, 3/4, pi, square root of 7, right? So rational and irrational numbers in there. Now for imaginary numbers, we kind of have two sets, right? We have imaginary numbers, but then we also have pure imaginary numbers. So our imaginary numbers are down here in green, and that's just when b is not equal to 0. But a is also not equal to 0, right? So in that case, we would have 3 plus 4i, or 8 minus 6i. So we have a real part and we have an imaginary part. And then our pure imaginary numbers, that's when b is not 0, but a is 0, right? And we kind of looked at that just a second ago, but that's going to be numbers such as like -3i, 7i, things like that, where the real part has canceled out and we're just left with that imaginary part, okay? So in this video is just an overview of what is a complex number. In later videos in this playlist that you're looking at for Algebra 2, we'll talk about, okay, how are complex numbers, when are they equal? How do we add them? How do we subtract them? How do we multiply them? So check out those videos in the playlist after this one. That's all for now.